Stories. Stories always connect us, isn't it? The best thing about stories is it's dear to everyone. So today, I'm not going to give you any gyan. I'm just going to share with you a few stories. You are all intelligent to take the message from these stories. Hey folks, I am CSK and I am an educator. The true thing about education is you can only facilitate learning. So stories are a phenomenal way to facilitate that learning. So here I am today to share with you a few stories. Now these are stories that are randomly picked, but they are of utmost significance for our lives. So without much ado, let's get started with story number 1. This is a story from Czechoslovakia. Okay, is that the way you said? Yes, Czechoslovakia. This is a story from there. Now, there was a lab which was established on the banks of that particular river, like how we have the famous Krishna, Godavari, Narmada, Sindhu, Kaveri, these rivers. There was one river in Czechoslovakia, and the lab was established on the banks of that river. It was serene, it was beautiful, it was made to order, that kind of an environment. Now, there was a ritual or a practice. Every 4 hours, the scientists from that lab used to walk out of the lab, collect water from that fresh river or fresh flowing water from the river, bring it back, test it, and then prepare a water test report, 4 copies, keep one for them in their office and 3 to the top 3 officials of the department, the president, the secretary, and also the joint secretary. So all the 3 people used to get a copy and one used to go to the office. Now, one guy who recently joined that particular lab did not quite get a hold of this particular practice. He started observing that every 4 hours, religiously, a team of scientists walk out, collect water, test the water, submit the report, and then take a print, 4 copies, and file it. Now, he could not hold it for 3 to 4 days. He observed and then he said, this is not done. Because on an average, every 4 hours means almost 6 times a day, day and night, they are going and collecting this and doing this. Why are they doing this? So he went and asked the senior scientist there and said, why are you doing this? He said, well, this is the practice. This is one of the reasons we exist here on this bank. And that's why we are doing it. No questions asked. It's part of our mandate. He was not convinced with this reply. He dug deeper, and upon further digging, he realized that this was started by a person who is now 97-year-old, a senior scientist back then, an advisor to the Prime Minister. He's no more actively involved in the lab, but he's still alive. So this man, being curious, dug a little more deeper, found his address, found his contact details, reached out to him, and then long story short, he lands up with that particular person, the senior scientist, the 97-year-old man. Now when he went there, he had only one question. And that question was, why this practice? Why 4 hours water test? But only after reaching there, he realized that 97-year-old man could not hear properly. So he made a lot of circus. And upon all those things, he made sure that he reached out to that particular gentleman, the senior scientist, through written statement and asked this question, why is this practice started and why is it continued even today? And the minute that gentleman read this particular question, he laughed. He laughed and says, those idiots are following that even still now? The reply was shocking. Those idiots are following that even now? Now this made him to ask the next question. What do you mean? And then the senior scientist, the 97-year-old man, gentleman, continued. He said, well, When I joined the lab, or rather when I joined to serve the government, it was the time when World War II was in progress. Now, I was scared that this river, being the single largest source of drinking water to our country, could be polluted by poisonous gases and other things. So, we tried to test every 4 hours to check the validity of the water for its consumption, and I had to submit that report regularly to all the people concerned, the general and others. And that's why 4 copies, and that's why the tradition or the practice. Now, the less is said about it, the better now, because we all understood that these scientists who came after, because that old man took his assistant and went to the river base, set up a bank with a tent, and then created this particular report only to protect his country. Over a period of time, the war ended, and then people started liking that environment, the serene beauty of that riverside, and they created a full fledged lab for its contribution to the safety of the nation. And rest, as they say, is history, but this people continue to practice. So, friends, the moral of the story, by now you must have already got, is without understanding the why behind whatever we do, just doing things by common practice doesn't take us anywhere. Now, there are many, many examples I can give you where people go wrong, get it completely wrong by just following the mob, by just commonly practicing what is commonly practiced without asking the question, why? Why am I doing whatever I am doing? Now, at least now, we can understand that a lot of resources are wasted, are at stake if we continue to do things without knowing the why. For example, those reports which were sent in 4 copies every 4 hours, they had to build a storehouse just to keep those documents day after day, week after day, week, month after month. Can you imagine? That pile of document, the storage space, and the manpower and the resources that are wasted for a practice where nobody dared to ask the why question. So let's understand the why before embarking on the what and the how. That's story number one. Let me tell you another story. Of course, both are not related, but then, as I said, stories are our way of learning. So there is this other story which I really, really liked, and this kind of moved me. So there was this chemistry professor in a college, a degree college, and he had this peculiar habit of deviating from his lessons. And he wanted to kind of make it interesting for his class. So every time he embarked on his lecture, somewhere in the middle, he used to take a detour and engage with some kind of a game or a quiz or some kind of a interaction with the class. So on one particular day, he was teaching organic chemistry, and in between he suddenly stopped and he asked the class, here's a question to all of you, anybody can answer, in fact all of you should answer. How many of you remember the name of your grandfather? Now, many people looked at their faces in a peculiar way as to what has my grandfather's name got to do with organic chemistry in the class. But the teacher has asked the question and this class has to answer. So almost everybody raised their hand and said, we do remember our grandfather's name. To that, the professor continued. He said, very good, very well then. I'm very happy that you all remember your grandfather's name. Let me ask you another question. How many of you remember his father, that is your great grandfather's name? Now the class is puzzled. They continue to look at each other, and the number of hands that were up came down, and hardly 8 or 10 of them were still holding them up, saying that they still remember their great grandfather's name. Looking at that, the professor gave a sigh of relief and said, okay, not bad. At least 1/4 of the class remembers the great grandfather's name. He paused for a while, looked out of the window, and thought for a while, and then came back with another question. This is my last question. How many of you remember your great grandfather's father and his name? Now, even those 8-10 hands came down drastically, and all of them were puzzled as to why will we remember our great great grandfather's name? In fact, one girl could not control her frustration in a chemistry class. This man is playing the fool. So he said, "What's the use, sir? Let's go on with the lesson." The professor was puzzled with that reply. He looked at that girl and said, "Sorry, but I want to know, what do you mean by what is the use?" So the girl said, "Well, he did not do anything great that I have to remember him. So just get on with the lesson." Our professor did not get on with the lesson. He stopped and he looked around and said, "Okay, you have these photographs here which is displayed in your class. Can you tell me who are they?" The first photograph was that of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Next photograph was that of Shankaracharya, the great guru. Then there was another photograph of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. Right? So these three photographs were displayed there, and almost all students said, "Yes, this is Ramakrishna Paramahams, this is Shankaracharya, and this is Dr. Kalam, all great gurus." So the professor was very happy that all these people remember these three great gentlemen. And he said, "Well, any of you are related to them? Are they your grandfathers or great-grandfathers or great-great-grandfathers?" The class said, "What kind of a question is this? Why is he even connecting us to them? They are great souls." So the class unanimously said, "No, we don't remember, we are not related to any of these people." The professor continued and he said, "Okay, well, in that case, then why do you remember them?" When this entire conversation was happening between the class and the professor, one girl could not help and she was weeping. So the professor said, did I hurt you or your feelings?" So he stopped abruptly and went to that girl and said, "What happened? Why are you crying? Is everything all right?" So the girl said, "Sir, today you taught us the most important and valuable lessons of our lifetime. Forget about organic chemistry, but you taught us how to become human beings." Professor was like, What do you mean? Can you explain to the class?" She said, "Yes, I will." And she stood up and said, "From this entire questioning, I understood one thing, sir. Those who live their life for the sake of others will never forget them. But those who live their life for their sake, others will never remember them. Take this example of me not remembering my great-grandfather's name. I don't even know his name and his contribution because he lived a life, he gave birth to his children, he took care of his family, and then the generation continued. Today, I am his great-grandchild and I don't remember his name. But these people, they never had their families or they did not do great things to their families, but they did something worthwhile to the world and the humanity, and today we recognize them." So the professor said, well said. I don't know whether you learned a lesson, but in your reply, I learned a lesson from my life. But let me also tell you one thing. I'm not here to tell you," the professor continues, "I'm not here to tell you that you should not have families. I'm not here to tell you that you should not live selfish lives. I'm only here to tell you that in the whole fight towards living a better life, a great life, do not forget empathy. Do not forget helping each other. Do not forget taking care of people around you, because only then you would have lived a life well." So 2 lessons coming, one from the student and one from the professor, and the class was made, and the class of organic chemistry suddenly became a class of a lifetime. So friends, these are 2 stories I thought I'll share with you, randomly picked, but then they are life lessons. I'm sure you all are intelligent enough to draw meaning from this particular experience and these lessons, but keep taking these inspirations and move on, because as they say, in our rut of daily life, you need inspirations, you need motivation, you need to take a pause to look back and say, okay, how am I going forward in my life? Hope these 2 stories help you. Maybe I'll bring back some more stories in the future. Thank you very much for watching CSK Speaks.